rates is the highest. Our economic resiliency seems strong and ready to rebound. And Minnesotans, again, take a big part in that. That map I keep showing, they took this social compact seriously. So I think overall, we'll wait till we get totally done with this thing, but we've responded, I think, the way the data, the ethics, the creativity, and the ability to be resilient when things did not work or could go a different direction. So Dave?
Yeah, I have a question for Commissioner Malcolm. Commissioner, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. And we've seen time and time again across the country with this pandemic that there is a correlation by when you allow things to happen, people do it. These vaccines are not 100% effective. I'm wondering what sort of personal advice you'd be giving to people who are wondering, should I go to the Twins game with my kid who's unvaccinated or whatever?
It is a great question, and I think, as we said during the earlier section, just because government is no longer making the decisions or saying certain things are out of bounds, doesn't mean that we don't all have to keep making well-informed decisions and think about our own individual risk, but also the risk of people around us. So I do think, that folks who are not yet vaccinated really need to think hard about what additional risks they're putting themselves and others at by doing some of the things I know they're eager to do. So I really hope that we can get that message across, and I thank you guys for helping with that the pandemic isn't gone, and this is now, as Commissioner Grove said earlier, the decision-making burden, if you will, or privilege shifts to us as individuals and businesses, and that's, we think, the natural evolution of things.
Governor Walz, I'm still confused about or uncertain about where the emergency powers stand. I know you're eliminating a lot of these emergency orders, but will you ask next week for an extension of the emergency powers? And should businesses be concerned if there's some new double secret variant that pops up, that a lot of these things could be put back in place?
They shouldn't be worried. They should know with confidence that we will continue to monitor this. We will do the things to keep Minnesotans safe. The authorities given under Chapter 12 that have been upheld in court after court allowed us to be able to do some flexibility. And people said this, well, the governor's using emergency powers. Yeah, to allow bars to pull tables out into the streets and use the right-of-way when we had to get outside more. So there are going to be a lot of the things that we put in place that are going to start to drop off. A lot of them are around licensing, being able to bring in outside nurses and doctors to be able to work here. The statement, as it became politicalized on emergency powers, is the governor wasn't working with the legislature. The system is set up at times where we need to move. Now, I would remind folks, in January, I gave a list of things that could be codified into law and taken off. Those are still being debated, and that's just kind of the nature of the legislature. So what I would tell you is, by the time we move through these things on the 28th of May and the 1st of July, later this afternoon, we'll be doing a new executive order that will basically put into place the recension of, I believe, 26 of the 34 remaining emergency orders, and what will be left is my ability to use the National Guard, the eviction moratorium until the legislature can work that one out, and then some of the things that have to be in place so the federal government reimburses us.
So, but will you request an extension, a 30-day extension next week?
Yeah, yes, because those things need to stay in place for be able to get that. I would assume that the legislature would unanimously support that, because what they see now is, I think they conflated mitigations that they didn't like, regardless of where the pandemic was. Keep in mind, that was the same. The pandemic was roaring out of control and we didn't have vaccines. Take off all mitigations. The pandemic is done. It should have taken off earlier. So I think they'll probably understand that. It seems to me we're at a new point here, because the end sight, if you will, of state mitigation efforts is done.
And as a quick follow-up on some of the specific impacts of this, what about professional sports? The Minnesota Wild have playoff games coming up. The Twins season is going on. The Timberwolves, there's big events like Grandma's Marathon in June. Are those events all, they're going to be able to start having build toward full capacity?
Yep, that's the way it's set up. There's no restrictions after the 28th. Outdoor activities, they can go now. They need to remain masked. If you're at Target Field, you can do that. But all these other events are good to go. The last things after the 28th of May, there's some of the business mitigations that are put in place, nothing new, those are already there. And then the mask requirement, and I'm asking Minnesotans, if you want to end the mask requirement, the simplest way to do that is let's close out this last 10%. You saw the number, about 474,000. We have the capacity to give 50, 60,000 a day if people choose to show up. And so those events will happen. Those are all on now. And in fact, is the outdoor events are no limit tomorrow at noon. So we had one, Peter, sorry.
I hate to be crass and talk about politics, but I will. How do you think this plays for the rest of this session, given that issues surrounding emergency powers and emergency orders have created tensions? Do you think this helps close out the session? The reaction today from the Republicans was not maybe what you might have thought you would get.
No, I can't really, because I don't know how the response would be. I had to respond through the lens of public health. And as I said, I recognize many of these decisions are very unpopular, but I think in the end, when people look back and start to see some of those numbers, they were successful. So I think today I'm gonna let Minnesotans enjoy what we did. I think there's some folks over there that it may impact how they see things differently. I mean, this is the right time to do this. We proved that we could do this. I would remind us, and Commissioner Malcolm's right, we're still above 1,000 cases a day. We have over 46%, I believe, community spread. We're still at 29 cases per 100,000. All of those are still very, very high, and we had 13 deaths. So I want to be clear, it's the trajectory of this, it's the glide path. If all the modeling, especially the Mayo model that has become very accurate in a short window, if Minnesotans continue to do what we're asking, and if they step up a little bit here on vaccinations, the next 2 weeks should see a 25% or bigger drop. If I don't know, I can't speak for them. I'm ready to get a budget done that brings Minnesota's economy back, that takes care of those who are most impacted. And we're still monitoring and doing our job around COVID, but obviously the state's role in that is now on vaccinations and testing, some of those things. So it's much less than it was. We have got another one back here.
Yeah, Governor, I'm curious about lifting the mask mandate before all age groups are eligible for the vaccine. Does that put 12 and under kids at more risk?
Jan, I might have you ask this. This is always a challenging one. Again, I'm trying to strike that Venn diagram, well-being. I think I feel more confident about it with school being out and it being summer, what we're seeing. And I think, again, the under 12, it probably is not going to be fall. Jan could speak to that. We're looking at what we're hearing from CDC is maybe fall for those 2 and above. But it sounds like over the next couple weeks, we should get authorization to do 12 through 15. But I think, our thinking around this is, I'll let Jan clarify, that is, they're still at risk there. Again, anything we do still has that risk, but the risk is significantly mitigated of moving into summer and the general population's vaccination numbers continuing to increase. So Jan.
Yeah, I think the governor got the key points there. And just to be specific, we're anticipating that the Pfizer vaccine the emergency use authorization will be amended to allow Pfizer for 12 and up. We know that both Moderna and Johnson & Johnson are also doing clinical trials of their vaccines for younger populations, and we expect that those two will be coming online probably in a matter of months. So our hope is that we'll have a good vaccine supply and a robust vaccination effort before school starts again. And as the governor said, the outdoor environments and kids especially, very good at maximizing that. That we feel like this is a time when relaxing the mandate is as a rule it makes some sense. But again, we will continue to give guidance that in certain settings for certain people, they really should continue to mask if they're not vaccinated. In terms of the really young kids, we've been told it might be into 2022 before we see vaccination down to the very young ages. But school-age kids, we expect to see pretty good progress here.
So you've been hesitant before to stick any incentives on the vaccination, like a vaccine passport. You said, just go get the shot, I believe you said at one point. Now you're kind of making vaccine an incentive, and a couple people already emailed me saying they feel like it's almost vaccine blackmail. But what do you say to that? You didn't want to use it as an incentive before, and now why are you doing that?
You mean around masks?
Yes, I mean, you're sticking out the end of the mask mandate on getting vaccinated. So.
Yeah, we're taking all these things off before we hit that number, because I think the science is pretty good that there's, the difference between 68 and 70. We obviously want it to get continuously higher. I just want to note on this, the politicization around masks, I think history is going to write as one of the worst things that's happened to this country. I think it costs lives. I think it's stupid. It's the least intrusive thing we can do, and it contained to get in that. I'm just asking people to put that, as it's been in many cases, back in their hands to try and do that. I'm actually a fan around incentivizing vaccines for some folks. I don't assume all these folks are anti-vaxxers. I continue to say that. I think there's a whole lot of folks who wanted others to get in line first, but I would just say, I'm just putting it in their hands. If you don't like the mask, then let's get vaccinated. But I also said I put a date on it. We may not be to 70%. I hope I'm wrong. I think we will be. But let's just say we're not. We're still removing that mandate because the number will be relatively close to that threshold. And I think what Commissioner Malcolm would say is that let's just say from the 1st of July then on into the fall, we need to keep driving that number higher and higher. I mentioned again that measles vaccination rates are 92%. And that proved in that case of that disease, we still had outbreaks around it. So we're going to have these hot spots. We're going to have these outbreaks, but at that point in time, our epidemiologists and our contact tracing teams will actually have work, because our community spread will not be at 40%. It'll be dropped way back down, and we can tell where people are getting it.
How much thought did you put into the 70% number is going to be reached based on the strength of people in these counties that are already at 70% or close to it and will continue to go higher, while in some counties in central Minnesota especially, the vaccine rate is stuck in the 30s, and they're less inclined to wear a mask. Some people there are less inclined to wear a mask anyway. How much thought did you put into that county by county issue?
Yeah, Jan, we may talk, this has been up since the beginning of this, of trying to do county by county, thinking about it. I certainly, there were suggestions out there, for example, that why don't you open up, take the masks off, let all the bars open once they reached a vaccine rate, and those counties that weren't there then, they wouldn't be able to do that. At this point in time, it's really more apparent than ever. I said this starting in the beginning, there's certain mandates I can put on, but there really is a social compact. You really need people to do this. It feels to me, and we'll see if I'm wrong or not, I think for those who didn't know where the finish line was, who were concerned that the governor will keep moving the goalposts, he'll keep doing this, and then it became so political. Now none of that's there. This is just straight up. This stuff's ending. Got the opportunity to go, and you really need to help Minnesota by getting this. Like I said, if there's a group of folks and they're saying, wow, we can go to a packed Twin Stadium, somebody in that group needs to tell Larry that he needs to go in and get his vaccine, that day is over. Just go get it, dude. You can get in, you can walk in, you're out in 20 minutes, and let's move on. You don't even have to tell anybody you did it. Just go do it. So I don't want to get us into this. We show that county data, and I think it's important. We talked about disaggregating, but I also think it adds a little bit to this, that there's a huge difference amongst the state. I need those folks to be vaccinated. I don't want to single it out. There's a lot of growth there. I see that. There's a lot of opportunity in those counties, and maybe now is the time, because for many of them now, the things that maybe bothered them the most, they know is date certain going away. And I told the legislature this, if you're worried about this, codify it and I'll sign it. Say all this stuff ends on the 28th, just as the governor said, put it into law and send it over to my desk then. Then there's law behind it. You don't have to worry about it. And give your constituents confidence that this is there. And again, I would say for people, we have hundreds of millions of doses out, 7 months of data in the real world. If you are a little bit worried about the safety of these vaccines, that has shown itself to be pretty good. Peter, as I thought a little more about you, you mentioned the political question. I'm kind of savoring a day for Minnesotans to be happy about this. I will go out of my way to make the difference. Now, I feel very comfortable. Now is maybe the time. those folks who aren't so certain, I'm going to invite them to my house for a barbecue so we can get the legislators back in, we'll get together, we'll sit in the backyard and we'll figure it out. We can get back to normal. So my pledge to them is to figure this out now. Some of that angst should be gone away. I'm confident that that many of them want to get this budget done too. More?
Can I ask about the timing of this? Why not just do all of this on May 14th? Why do something now and then on the 28th?
Yeah, Jan, you want to talk?
And also, is this time to Memorial Day and to 4th of July? It seems like they are.
Well, I will have Jan talk about this. This has to do with the lag period. We're still at a very high number. We're doing some of those things today because I think mitigating that risk. The big move that's coming on the 28th, we need this lag period to come back down. We've stalled just a little bit, but it will come. We think, and then Jan, you can tell us this, if Minnesotans do this, if that vaccination rate keeps going up, by the time we get to May 28th, we will not be at 1,600 cases or 5.9% positivity. We'll probably be closer to 600 cases at 3% positivity and the deaths going down. So the timing has to do with the lag of where we're going. And I will just be candid with you. I think what Minnesotans have gone through and what they've done, I was pretty adamant that it may have looked like we should have gone 4 weeks on this. The difference between 4 weeks and 3.5 meant that they could do Memorial Day. That did matter. And then, of course, the Jan, I'll get you, the July 1st date, that makes good epidemiological sense where we're at, but it also ties into the president's goals that we have a federal policy on this, and we are doing what we can do. And so many of these things, people are asking, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? It's because CDC guidance says this is where we should go, and we're still following that. So.
I really have very little to add to that, except to say that with the patterns that we've seen, every couple weeks really does matter. It increases, and we're hoping that the trends continue as they are, that the cases keep coming down and the vaccines keep going up, and hopefully with some of the new strategies that we're putting in place, the more community-based events, you'll see more of our public education media campaign, more from our outreach efforts into communities. We're hoping we can generate some more demand that's closer to the pace we were at a few weeks ago. So that might seem like a trivial difference, but I think those couple of weeks could make a big difference on both fronts.
Commissioner Grove, I have a question for you. If you could, it's actually kind of a two-part question. Some of the things we get emails about a lot at the station, weddings, many of them that were postponed from last summer to this summer, both the church services and the receptions. If they're having them after May 28th, it sounds like should be able to be pretty much back to normal without masks and different things. And then also the impact on fitness centers, short-term and long-term.
Yeah, so after May 28th, no restrictions at all on any of those events that you just mentioned. In the interim, gyms still remain at 50%. Religious services in the interim, starting tomorrow at noon, will only have the restriction that the groups who come to that religious service together need to be 10 or fewer, or a household size, and have 6 feet between them. So it's a social distancing restriction for religious services, but there's no caps on the numbers of people in the room or capacity percentage for religious services. And then, as you mentioned,
and in terms of, well, on the fitness centers, there's the requirement now that you got to wear a mask at all times, including in classes when you're on machines. Is that all staying in place, or is there an easing of that before the mask mandate goes away?
No, if you're an indoor fitness center, which most fitness centers are, the mask mandate will remain until we get to 70%. One other change for fitness centers, though, since you do mention it, is the class size is going up as of tomorrow to 50 people. It's currently at 25. So there is some loosening of restrictions in gyms, which is good. But again, as an indoor environment, the masking mandate remains there, congruent with other indoor settings.
Can you go over that church service thing again? I'm a little confused
Yeah,
by that.
so as of tomorrow at noon, religious services will not have a capacity percentage or a capacity cap. However, social distancing will be required between groups who come to that service together, right? So if you're a group of 10 that came to that service together or fewer, you can congregate together, but then it'll be 6 feet between those groups, between those groups in a religious service.
Well, so doesn't that in some ways put a cap if there's not enough space?
Certainly, yeah. Social distancing at 6 feet is in many ways the kind of last remaining component of any kind of a cap for any indoor venue right now, given the kind of math you have to do to figure out how many folks you can fit inside based on that requirement. But as of May 28th, that social distancing requirement of 6 feet between parties or between people will be gone.
Okay.
I just have a question about what it will look like.
It is, yeah. Yeah, and the governor may want to talk about this, or Jan. I'll just say, we are talking to the state fair consistently. These restrictions being lifted at this pace clearly will allow the state fair to take whatever appropriate measures they want to take to keep guests safe, but there'll be no state restrictions on the state fair as it relates to either masking by the time that state fair hits or overall capacity percentages. For outdoor events, as of tomorrow, really outdoor events are really pretty open. Parades, festivals, gatherings in parks, all these events that are so great about summer, as of tomorrow, will proceed as they might usually in any given summer. For venues in which there's sort of an enclosed venue and you have 500 or more people, the masking requirement will remain for outdoors, but even that, as of tomorrow, is gone for other sort of community events like this. So, we know business leaders, fair officials, others are going to navigate how to get this right for their venues. They want to make sure people feel safe coming to their events. So we expect to see some innovative and different solutions from those businesses. It's just that the time for the state to provide that guidance is fading here in the coming weeks.
But isn't there any concern, especially around children? Your numbers are still high in terms of cases. There's still a lot of people who aren't vaccinated. And I think people might wonder, well, is the summer camp or the summer rec leagues going to look the same? And people, I think, might be worried about that.
That's probably best answered by the governor. Yeah.
Yes, Esme, I want to acknowledge this uncertainty, this unease, and some anxiety. It's interesting to me now that, of course, that piece is what we've been worried about the whole time, because we've heard, again, since the beginning of this, why are you doing any of these mitigations? Why are you doing that? Because people are terrified and it put them at risk. So I want to be very clear. I don't downplay that. I think what you're seeing, Esme, and I would ask us to skate where the puck is going to be with this vaccine effort, where we think we're heading, with outdoor activities, with the risk mitigation that are already in place, we should see a significantly better place to do that. But I think you brought up a very good point. Commissioner keeps saying that. I think families need to make these decisions, and we're going to continue to put out recommendations. I would assume that the Minnesota Department of Health will have a recommendation for masking even when the mandate is gone, that we recommend that you do this. And there will be businesses that will clearly, when you fly on Delta or you go to Target, I would anticipate to go in there, you'll need to have a mask on. That may be how they will start to approach us with the best guidance. This is striking that balance between keeping folks safe, well-being, and economics. We think that by the 28th of May, that strikes well, especially with the outdoor events.
What will schools look like in the fall? What will
Yep.
I think a couple of things. When we're first thinking about summer, we are going to be working with the Minnesota Department of Health to really look at what our strong recommendations are going to be. So we know that up until the end of the school year, until the very last teacher day, so for the 2021 school year, our safe learning plan will be in effect. They will be able to do some of the outdoor pieces if they were doing outdoor activities, but really for indoors, we are maintaining what that safe learning plan looks like. Then we move into what the guidance is, the simple guidance that's been identified really beginning on May 28th, and we're going to utilize that for our summer school programming. Given that, we will have strong recommendations, like the governor said, around things like masking, things around social distancing and physical distancing, and really being thoughtful on those pieces. And we know that based on local control, our school districts, our superintendents, our charter school leaders are really going to be able to come together and decide what they would like to identify as a policy and a practice based on the strong recommendations that we've identified. In addition, if a school district or charter school chooses not to move forward with masking and putting forward a policy, families can always make that decision as well. A student can go to school wearing a mask. It gives them the opportunity to do that. And then as we look forward to fall, I think we're not ready to make a full decision around what that's going to look like. We're going to continue to monitor where we're at. We're going to continue to say, like, we are very hopeful, but hope isn't a strategy. And so what we're going to say is we're going to have that hope, and we're going to continue to look forward to seeing that this is going to be able to be as normal as possible based on what our school districts are doing. But we're also going to be cognizant of the fact that There are a lot of things that can change in a very short amount of time, and I think we've learned that better than anything else. And so we are going to have pieces in place to be able to help to support our school districts and our charter schools across the state, as well as students and families, to make sure that they have what they need in order to make decisions about where they want to go moving into the fall.
Commissioner Mueller brought up a great point. The other day we were out in Hopkins School District at Alice Smith Elementary, and the question you're bringing up is, what about if you have a student that's immunocompromised or a family that can't get that over? That's why we will offer and still be offering virtual learning for those students. That'll be a choice that parents can make. Those will still be in place because we got asked about a piece of legislation to ban all virtual learning. Well, we're not taking that away from parents to make that decision for their children. They need to be able to have that, and we need to be able to offer it. Is that correct, Commissioner? Yeah. This was really interesting because it was a family that asked about this very issue.
Right, and I think that I appreciate that, and one of the things that's important is we do have legislation that's in front of our team now, really looking at how it is we can move forward with distance learning. Once the executive orders are removed and are rescinded, that means that distance learning, as we know it today, does not exist. We would need to move forward with an online environment, and so we have asked the legislature to please move this legislation around distance learning for at least this next year to allow us to be able to do what we need to do and what we want families to have the options of being able to do. So that's a really important piece that we want to be able to communicate, that our legislature has this in front of them now, and we are asking that they move this forward.
Governor, did you ever consider having a different type of mandate for people who've been vaccinated? So many Minnesotans have been fully vaccinated. Did you ever give any thought to, if you're vaccinated and you got proof of it, you don't need to wear a mask?
Yeah, well, no, thank you, Tom. We think of everything. When we have these discussions, there's a course of actions that I ask our team to bring up all these different ideas, and they're getting those ideas from going out and listening to people. I think we talked about early, some businesses may choose to go down this route, and I know, again, one of those things that got deeply politicized, the idea of a vaccine mandate, if you will, on that. At this point, one of the things is that I think I'm hesitant about that because of how it's been politicized. The other thing is, I think that chart I keep showing, and our numbers keep reflecting this, Minnesotans' willingness to get vaccinated outpaces the rest of the country, and I think it makes it less of a necessity. And I quite honestly don't want to see what we saw around masking in some parts of the country where people were literally having fistfights in the produce aisle because someone wasn't wearing a mask or was wearing a mask. But I think you'll see, and I mean, this will be whether flying on a plane or some of those things. I think businesses, as Commissioner Grove said, it's going to be about confidence. Just because you take off the mandates, and we saw this early in this, reservations at restaurants don't spike out the roof because people are still like, I don't know if I'm comfortable to go back into a totally packed bar that's open until 2 a.m. with no capacity limit other than the fire marshal's code. So we've talked about it. I don't think it's right for Minnesota. I think we get better buy-in from folks, the direction we're going, but I certainly respect those individual businesses who may start to think that this might be a better way to build confidence.
And you said you're going to ask next week for an extension of the emergency powers. Is there a benchmark for when you will let those lapse? Have you given that some thought about when we would be at a point where you don't need those powers?
Yeah, it's all been around where we were at in the point in the vaccine. At this point in time, it's really around vaccination capacity and necessities of things we need to do to receive federal funds. If we are not in a emergency power situation, it changes some of the things we get from the federal government. Now, I asked them if they wanted to put that in, codify that, to do that so that I don't have to do it so that we get the federal funds to do that. That hasn't happened. And so I think what you could anticipate, what it's going to take, and they could put it into law, we may need to have state-run vaccination sites for the next 6, 8, Jan, maybe into the near future, and then when boosters come or whatever, they may be able to put that in there. So right now, it's just operationally is why we're using those. I think this thing when it became politicized is saying, well, the governor's using emergency powers to close businesses. We're using the authority of the health pandemic to make sure that we weren't spreading it further, and the emergency powers gave us that. At the point we're at right now, after May 28th, most of those are gone. And again, the legislature could take out the last two big ones, which would be the eviction moratorium and price gouging, that they could just codify those into law. And I think they're close. And so at that point, we'll see, Tom. I don't think there's going to be much talk or much complaint around the emergency power unless it's being used, just as a strictly political thing. I think they'll want to do that. I do things every day that are constituted to the executive branch that the legislature doesn't do because we have to carry them out. They pass legislation, say, around, highway construction, and then it's my job to implement how we're doing that. And some of those things make moving things around to get federal funds or whatever. So
Are you concerned about the political implications the closer you get to the 2022 elections of having these powers for such a long time? Or as you joked earlier in your speech, you want to keep people alive long enough to vote against you if that's what it takes?
I do. I think most people understand. Again, the thing when people see these emergency powers go away, many of them are actually things that if you were conservative, you wanted to have. It reduced some requirements, some regulations. And the one that I get a kick out of, that we have to end this, that gave bars the authority to use state right-of-way to set up tables so that they could serve people outside and increase their capacity. So why would they have wanted to take that away from, if Slippery's wants to drag a table out in Wabasha and it works with the city, they should be able to do that. So I think it'll become less. But what I get is it's a lot about narrative. And again, since January, many of these things could have been legislated. There was nothing that said you couldn't legislate them, and I said I'd sign them into law. For the last 2 months, I've been having daily conversations. Can't you just codify the eviction moratorium? Can't we get an off-ramp here? We all agree that it'd be economic catastrophe to have mass evictions. We also agree that landlords should get paid. That's why we implemented the Rent Help Minnesota program to get that done. I just think now it becomes an easy talking point, especially after the 28th of May. I mean, keep in mind, and again, if we get vaccinated, and certainly July 1, if we use that, the state is only vaccinating people and using the emergency powers to have the federal government reimburse us for things we're doing.
Thank you.
Governor, I'm
We got two.
curious.
We'll do two.
I'm curious what high school graduation ceremonies will look like, and if the state is giving any guidance on how those should look.
Yeah, maybe I'll let the health commissioner. There'll be guidance and their recommendations. I think, you can all do the math on the dates. They can gather outside unlimited, and after the 28th inside, in any way they see fit. The only thing they'll be asked to do is if they're inside, they'll have a mask on. If they're outside and they're under 500 people, they won't. And so I think each will decide. Now, I would hope, and the commissioner will do this, both commissioners will do this. We have some areas that are still hotter than others. We have some areas that have higher incidents. Again, we're basically talking 1 month from today when a lot of those things will start to take place. I just want to encourage Minnesotans to get to 70%. We need about 474. There were days that we were vaccinating 56,000 people a day in Minnesota. And the federal government has said, if you have that kind of demand, ask us for the doses. So if I would like to see our website get almost crashed by people saying, all right, I'm done. Now's the time I'm going. But other than that, they're free to do what they need to do. Is that correct, commissioners? That's what you're like. And Jan, you'll be putting out recommendations. My guess is that if you do that, you'll see a large number of people, especially if they're concerned or for whatever reason, they will be wearing masks and distancing. I'll go, Peter. We got time to get a couple.
Governor, the Senate has passed an eviction off-ramp bill with 48 votes, including 12 DFL votes. So it might sound to people that they have not done that thing that you're asking them to do.
They got to finish it. That's not finished. They have to conference it, and it has to be done, tightened up, and on my desk. If the legislature comes to a compromise that is workable for them, I'm certainly not going to hold them up. We had a few principles in there. I think probably the biggest sticking point to me looks like the time in that. I do think that maybe we helped with that with the 15-month of rental assistance that came with the last Recovery Act, and now that's implemented. So I think they can button that up and get that over. And again, that would go back to where Tom's at. That would probably take off the last of the mitigation pieces as they see on the emergency powers that really, other than just the maintenance stuff. Dave?
Slightly off COVID topic, but it's more important. The walleye opener will be on May 15th this year. That is the weekend at the end of legislative session. Will you be out there fishing? Will you invite Senator Gazelka onto your boat? And will you guys talk walleye and end of session
Yeah,
solutions?
this is a time-honored tradition, and last year we did do that, and it falls on that weekend. It's a time that you get out there. I do believe, and I do believe Senator Gazelka let me know that he has a family conflict and won't be able to, but we talked about it, and I did ask him to be there. There may be some others that will be there. We can certainly do that. We'll be outside, you know, in fact, folks will be vaccinated. We're going to be up in Otter Tail County for the walleye opener, encouraging people. I think Commissioner Grove could talk better about this. The economy has definitely changed. Things made a big difference. Last year, we saw our largest purchase of hunting and fishing licenses than we have in a generation. We've got a whole new group of people who are into this. This is what Minnesota has. So I'll try and encourage them. We'll be up there. It is a golden opportunity to do that. So maybe there'll be a few others up there to.
And Governor, we are the state of hockey as well as the state of fishing. The NHL season ends May 19th. I assume the Wild will have a playoff game sometime before the 28th. Will they still be restricted to what do they have now, 3,000 fans? Or how is that going to be? Is there a playoff exception?
It's gone up as of tomorrow, so.
Yeah, there's no more cap on the total number of people you can have indoors. It's just based on capacity percentage. There's an online calculator you can find at staysafemn.gov to plug in the number of seats that you have and figure out your capacity. But essentially, we've popped those percentages up for indoors, for seated and non-seated, in the interim between now and the 28th. After the 28th, no restrictions at all.
Okay.
If they make it further in, they get to the 28th, it's a full house.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it. Thank you.
Governor, did you say you were inviting legislators over for a barbecue? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
I threw that out here now. I'm sure my team's saying, wow, that's great. You maybe should have let the First Lady know that before. Yeah, I think we get back to that. I have to tell you that I do think some of that has been exasperated. No, not some of it. A lot of it has. All of you have lived this, and some of you live your lives, you know, with the camera, but that has just made it hard. It makes it less personal. I mean, the attacks become more personal because we're less in person, which really ratchets it down. When you're sitting in a room with someone looking at them, it's much better. So we started last Friday. Really, the first meeting was a week ago tomorrow, where I sat down with the leaders, Democrat and Republican, in the conference room at the Capitol to start talking about that. And again, I don't think it's by chance. That was the most productive and cordial meeting that we've had. And so I do want to invite them over. I think that's one of the things. We used to do breakfast together. We've got to get back to that where we just differ. But it's not this, you know, you're the enemy and everything you say is wrong. We've got to get away from that. So I will invite them. We'll get this done. I think over the next, week and a half that we're doing this, it would be good for us to talk, but then to socialize a little bit, get the humanity back. And we got golden opportunity to redo things differently after this. We've got important work to get done. We're not going to get everything that everyone wants, but we really are in a pretty unique spot that this divided legislature once again, and the fiscal shape of the state is solid enough that we should be able to do some things together that don't cause the massive rift or the breakdown that sometimes happens when you get to the end. So yeah, I want to do that with them.
Will any of those interactions be limited if certain members are not vaccinated?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, I don't think so, but I think it would be a time for some good-natured, just come on, get this done. I greatly thank former Governor Paulini, was very clear and understood this. So I think it's very clear he and I differ greatly, but I respect him. He's a friend, and I ask him to come show people that this is not political. I keep saying that. And I don't, again, it's people's personal choice on this, but I have heard some Republican legislators say they've gotten vaccinated. They're glad to do that. So I wouldn't limit it on that, but I would ask that folks do that. I mean, we can be just good examples on this, good role models that, again, Minnesotans overall are for vaccination. So if you do it for just political reasons, the majority of voters think you should get vaccinated. So it's a good point. Maybe we could give a vaccination clinic in the backyard. I don't know. All right. Well, I just want to say again, we'll be together a little more, but this has been a journey for all the folks in this room. It's been a challenge of managing their own families, their own health, while telling the story in a very chaotic, very unknown global pandemic that had serious political over and undertones in the middle of a national election and deep racial unrest in Minnesota. So I think Minnesotans, again, to pause for a moment and realize the information you're getting, the questions that you want to ask are being asked by the professionals who do that and listen to you has been really, really important. We're not done yet, but I think the way we've navigated this together, the things that worked, the things that didn't work, the questions, I am deeply grateful for that. And these sessions of getting to ask and asking and us having a clear understanding this is our responsibility has been really helpful for the state of Minnesota. So you have my deep appreciation, and we're here. And I'm sure you are all not typing your stories, but buying Twins and Wild tickets. So go at it. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, commissioners.
Good day.